All right, welcome for this very special edition of the Canadian Patriot Podcast, where Cynthia and I are very, very pleased that we're joined by the Holmes family. And I got to say, I was first introduced to this very exceptional family a couple of weeks back when a documentary that Cynthia and I had worked on with Jason Dahl, our friend and filmmaking colleague, went public, and we were doing a special Halloween broadcast that was live streaming. And Jason paused 45 minutes into it and said, part of Halloween is tricking and treating. So I figured I'd just do both at the same time. And I'm like, what do you think? What are you talking about, Jason? We're talking about aliens and ghouls and conspiracies. And all of a sudden he's like, well, tricking and I'm going to trick you and treat you at the same time. So he presses pause and unveils an entire family to me, which made my night. It took a really twisted, dark, Satan worshiping night, as Halloween is, and turned it into a blessed thing that I really, really enjoyed. And the thing that Cynthia and I have really appreciated with just looking into you guys, listening to some of your interviews, your background, and getting to speak with Mike the other week, is really that we often encounter people, especially in the last wave of, for lack of a better word, people waking up out of their slumber. This tends to come in waves. John F. Kennedy's murder was a big wave of people asking more critical questions about what's controlling their government. Big burst. The Vietnam War, a huge burst of younger people in the 60s wondering, well, why are we seeing our friends and our family members coming back in body bags in a war that doesn't seem to make any sense? I kind of understood the fight against Nazis, but Vietnam, really? And so a lot of people were asking questions. And the problem is that there's often a little, once there's a little taste of stability, people go back into slumber mode. 9/11 was a big shakeup. A lot of people woke up, and then the world didn't completely fall apart. And a lot of people just got happy, or at least satisfied with going back into their slumberland. And obviously the whole pandemic was a big kick in the ass for a lot of people. So we've encountered a lot of people who come from families that were negatively affected through these various wake ups. One person becomes a critical thinker, and all of a sudden it becomes more and more of an outcast. It's very traumatizing for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people listening have either themselves have that experience or know people who have had that experience. Rarely do we find a whole family that wakes up together and that grows together through this sort of crisis. And so I was really overjoyed just to hear your story a little bit, get to know you guys. So I figured what we could do today would be to introduce the Holmes family and just to introduce people to you guys as a little bit of a living model that this is possible, that a family can actually be integrated, work together, share together, and overcome challenges together. So how did you guys go through this process? Was it before COVID? Was it COVID, or what's your story a little bit? Maybe Mike, I don't know if you want to maybe kick it off. I realize now that a
Yeah,
multi-person interview is going to require a little bit more thought on my part.
especially when everyone's going to have their own take on
Yeah,
sort of
right.
their role in the journey, right? Like a bunch of individuals making a cohesive collective. This is a leftist's wet dream if they just understood that this is the way it can actually function without having to be dictatorial or totalitarian. So we joke sometimes when we say that we have a hidden dictatorship in this family. The missus being the dictator, and I'm the blunt force trauma labor. But one of the things that we had as a family philosophy was everybody does have a voice. Two cans in the patch. If you can't do it, you can't stay. We believe in getting good. We believe in being wrong. We believe in talking to each other about it. We think out loud a lot in our household, so there's a lot of communication. As to the origins of that whole functionality, I mean, I don't want to like take up too much time, and everybody will have their perspective on it. And it's absolutely fantastic getting to listen to everybody's, because that's what's helped make my understanding of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one thing I will say is that as a parent, children have the right to judge your performance. It's not really the other way around. I can hold a standard, but if I'm not living and demonstrating the standard, they need to be able to watch something that they can properly criticize and properly mirror. And so it's really, it belongs to them to judge. It's up to me to responsibly demonstrate. And that doesn't always work out because we're a family. So there's not always a responsible demonstration. But I would like to run reverse correlations and say that we do that more for better than we do for worse. So that'll be my contribution to this. And then I'll let the missus take a poke at it. Go ahead, Noel.
Yeah, Noel. Yeah, let's hear what the dictator has to say.
Unmute, Mom.
Oh, yeah, you're on mute. Uh-oh.
Mom.
Okay, I'm there. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So before COVID, I just want to give a quick backstory just to make you guys laugh, Cynthia and Matt, because I was raised hardcore Pentecostal. And now that I'm following Cynthia's work on the, the occults and Matt's work on the history of all that, I'm like, oh, darn. But no, I knew something was amiss. And I'm really thankful that you guys have helped walk me through an awakening on the actual truth of history on that in its own sense. And then COVID, well, we were just working hard, didn't really, pay attention to too much globally. And then COVID kind of changed that because we were just starting to find podcasts on like Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein. We were just starting to find podcasts and who are these people that think so great and their teachings and then we stumbled on you guys and we started buying books, reading books, buying podcasts and listening and going, we don't know a lot. Okay, so now that we know a lot, we're going to learn really, really quick. So we quit watching hockey. And in the evenings, we'll do throw one of the Rising Tide things up and then we'll watch it, take notes, talk about it. And it's we're trying to educate as fast as we can now to catch up because our life now will just be learning. We won't stop because we didn't know what we didn't know.
That's great. Yeah. And I love it's like when you get a sip of something really pure and good, like water, after you've been told that Coca-Cola is all that exists. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, but there's this water. Then going back to Coca-Cola is not exactly as pleasurable. It's hard to try to go back. So I get it. Once the higher pleasures of discoveries happen, I felt something really similar too. When I, years ago, wasn't really, I mean, maybe you guys were more bookish. I'm not too sure. I wasn't, but for no, not really. So yeah, I mean, me neither. And I just knew, oh my God, I don't know anything, but nobody seems to know anything, including the people who seem to be really educated. So at the very least, I got to figure out, well, where are the people who seem to have known something? They must be out there.
Yeah.
And how can I find what they're reading and trace out how they're thinking so that I have something to hold on to? So that seems to be a sort of similar experience, Noelle, that you just described in some way too. Yeah, that's great. Kyle, do you want to take a shot at it?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of showed up a little late to the Holmes family because I'm not actually of the Holmes blood. So I was best friends with Sebastian in high school and had a little bit of a falling out over some stupid, teenage garbage. And then we reconnected, started hanging out again. And right around that time, me and my parents haven't had a great communication for my entire life. And so anyways, they ended up moving out of province and I didn't want to go with them. They were going to a small place and I didn't really feel like there was a future for me there. So I chose to stick around. And so the Holmes family took me in and man, they were great communicators. I had to do a lot of catch up. My communication skills were not up to par when I first jumped into this household, but yeah. And then that was right around 2020-ish when I moved in. I can't remember how late in the year it was, but COVID was kind of already on the go and whatnot.
Yeah, COVID was already up and running.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. They hadn't done. There wasn't really much talk of the vaccine and whatnot yet, and so it was still pretty early, just pre-hardcore lockdown stuff. And then,
by the way, mental note: Ixnay on the Axine Ve. Since we're going to try to get this uploaded onto YouTube.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But if it comes out, it comes out. No point in over self-censorship, right?
Yeah, I will tread tactfully.
Jabs is always a safe one. Jabs.
Fair enough. Yeah, but anyways, yeah. So during the whole COVID process, that was a big wake up call as to how the world actually works and the role we've unfortunately played throughout the entire process. We've got a big accountability ethos in this house, so we try to recognize how we've contributed to the problem that we currently find ourselves facing. So yeah, so like discovering your work has been a very, very, very good boon. So I do have to give you some serious thanks. You've definitely broadened all of our horizons. So it's a pleasure to finally meet you.
Yeah, likewise. It, I mean, it looks like you jumped into a good life raft.
Yeah.
Cynthia, who do you think we should ask next? Obviously, we have a boy girl thing going on here, so maybe we should keep that going.
Why do you make it so weird?
I did it. I can't take it back now. The weirdness is out there. So now you decide.
Well,
It's
you know,
true, it's true.
you can continue with just select. You put yourself in position.
Really? You're gonna make me take that back? All right, fine.
Yeah.
So Madison.
Okay. Hello.
All right. Hello. What's your story?
Yeah, I mean, Mom alluded to it. It was COVID that gave us the wake-up call, which is, government's trying to demolish you. Your history has been basically the same thing over and over again, thanks to the left hemisphere. All of that jazz started coming out really during COVID, but we've always been a communicative family, thanks to Dad, and luckily he has a right hemisphere proclivity, so communication, and him and Mom grew up talking to one another. They would tell us about how they would go on walks at night and just talk for hours and hours, so they just continued that when they had us. So even though there were times where maybe we weren't super tight as family, just because Dad worked on the rigs, and he came off at a perfect time, though. It was just when me and Macy were kind of at that early adolescence, when things were about to get real tumultuous. So he came off at a perfect timing to kind of help re-guide that, because Mom had been holding down the fort for such a long time. But I've always usually associated us with a close family, despite not being geopolitically aware. But I think that's my little spew for the generality.
Right. And when you say your dad came off the rigs, because you're working in the oil fields back in those days, up until 2020 or so, or 2019.
I came off the rigs in 2017.
Okay.
So it actually had nothing to do with COVID. That just has to do with my story.
Right.
I rose the ranks of my career, but there were bureaucracy was starting to close in on what I consider to be my gift, is just caring about my crews. And it just also so happened that like they were stealing my joy from doing my job, and coming home was just the right. It was, we kind of joke around in this household and say the universe has a funny way of kind of guiding you along if you're willing to pay attention. So certain doors were looking like they were closing. So just felt like it was time to make a pivot. So that's what brought me home. That was in 2017.
Amen. No, that's good. Yeah. The just being able to have, and Cynthia and I, we know the feeling too. We'll go for long walks and chatting in a family that talks together, walks together. That's a terrible banner, but it's true. It is so important to just keep that momentum going and having that internal culture, because often I think people, they tend to feel isolated because they will tend to all of a sudden walk according to a beat of a different tune once they start thinking about the higher dynamics shaping our lives, the higher ideas, and all of a sudden they'll sort of start latching on to this higher reality, but everybody else is walking to a different tempo, and it's all of a sudden like you're living in the same universe, but you're not mentally, and it's very difficult because the culture that we have disencourages people from pursuing a love of ideas, and that includes also the communication part of it, not just doing it for your own consumption. And that's where the point of culture comes in, having like a culture where people can feel trust with each other, that they can showcase what they don't know, make mistakes and not get attacked, and just try to work things through reason. And the fact that you guys have created like a little community, a little cultural field, that's really good and really, really important. So yeah, I really get the importance of having you back into the ship as well, to just fuel that fire and keep that going with everybody else. That's nice. Sebastian, what's your story?
So I'll start it off at 2017 too, just because it's an interesting reference point. Because Mikey boy comes home from the rigs. I just graduated high school, went to work as a pump jock, pumping people's gas for I believe it was co-op, and Kyle was also looking for a job around that time, so he ended up doing the same thing as me for a little while. But to sum it up nicely, is Kyle started looking into Jordan Peterson. And from there, we kind of had a little bit of a intellectual awakening because we just started sort of delving into a bunch of people's literary works, meaning their books and some of their podcasts. And one time, I can't remember when it was, at some point we were hanging out at my place, and we kind of explained a small synopsis of Jordan Peterson to Mike, and he figured like, oh, okay, there's something to this. I'll take a look. And to kind of skip over a bunch of things leading all the way up to 2020. So Mike actually never stopped listening to podcasts and reading books through Audible from that point forward. He actually just kept listening to books and podcasts like anywhere from 8 to 10 hours a day. And anytime somebody mentioned a book in the similar, like the social sphere of some of these people that I just previously mentioned, he'd go and read it and he'd crush it, and then he'd start following their work, and it sort of just kept networking further and further and further out and towards the stratosphere, basically. So all the way in 2020, when COVID and all the things that will get us demonetized that we can just skip over because we all know what we're talking about, he threw a book our way that brought us into a different understanding, not on the geopolitical scale, but related to the COVID narrative. That was basically the start of what I would say was our awakening, because that's when me and Kyle started playing this game that Mike was playing of reading books and listening to podcasts, and the girls started to snowball and avalanche towards garnering massive amounts of information in a short period of time. And from there, it didn't stop. We stopped looking at only mainstream thinkers. Dad started getting into sort of the Rumble sphere. At some point, your name came up, and I mean, the rest is history. We've probably each of us listened to well over 100 hours of your podcasts and Cynthia's podcasts, just trying to catch up because we've been so behind. So, and that would be my sum up.
Cool. No, that makes her night. That's great to see. Because sometimes, you find yourself speaking into the microphone on random podcasts, and you don't really know how it's resonating out there. So it is nice to just get a little bit of this confirmation that there's souls out there. They're taking it in, chewing on it, doing something with it. Thank you. That's good. Well, Macy, we haven't heard anything from you yet.
I am a last child, so I feel like this makes sense.
Cool.
Gosh, I think a funny thing that you mentioned though, which is the walking together. Our family literally would go on walks together, the entire clan, and we just talk about whatever and anything. I think the major story of how we kind of turned out the way we have is just communication about anything and everything. Like, there's not one topic that we won't touch on. And when it comes to mom and dad, I give kudos to them because they admitted as parents when they didn't know what they were doing. Like when they were like, we have no clue, but we'll figure it out together. And that's kind of always been our motto now, where it's like, if we lose, we'll do that together too. It's because it's just one of those, when it comes to, I think, parenting and all that, and through the observations, a lot of the time sometimes they play and put on a specific role, but later on dad decided, I'm no longer just going to be your father, I'm going to be your friend. And then mom followed suit, and then I guess it rippled from there. And then when it came to the COVID scenario, we got kind of into the motto of incremental progress from Jordan Peterson, and it's been like that ever since. And we've had a couple of people say that our dynamic is a little bit funky because the boys I think are like 24 range, right? And me and Maddie are also in our early 20s, and people sometimes will come up to us and ask us like, why aren't we out of the house yet? The typical like way that you're supposed to be starting your own families, all that. And honestly, it's just because I think that we know that we're strong together. And although those things are valuable lessons and they are, there's so much to be garnered there, wisdom wise, also just through the knowledge of the world state, it doesn't seem tangible at the moment. And also we've all agreed that we love each other and we want to stick it in together. Like that's just what we want to do because we built that structure of respect for each other and honesty, like 100% pure honesty. So yeah.
Well, no, that is so healthy.
I find, yeah, that's really good what you guys have emphasized, which I myself, like Matt and myself, we also go for long walks, and we would go for like 3 hour walks or something and just talk about whatever, or we can just go for a dinner, and we're just always processing a lot of information as well. And we just always have something to talk about. And by also being able to talk about it with someone else, you're also starting to look at it from a different angle, or there's a lot of times by just trying to talk about it, you all of a sudden discover things. So Matt can even just be quiet and I'm just trying to explain, my thoughts on something. Then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, there's that, discovery, and oh, there's this other discovery. So this practice of just trying to formulate your thoughts in more of like a structure and a composition is so central. And I think you guys are such a wonderful example of how you weren't even thinking of politics, which, the average family, it shouldn't be necessary that everyone's just like, having to process this amount of information on geopolitics, and it's not the most positive subject. There's a lot of like good subjects that I wish I had more time to look into, that are actually more important for the longer term, right? In terms of like, you look back 80 years from now, who are the writers that really stand out? Those are the people who had the longer term, contributions to things. Of course, the politics of the day are also very important, but there's always, that balance. And so it totally makes sense now that you guys were able to snap in the way that you did because of just that core ability to communicate, so that you had a voice. And you also when you're able to talk with other people, you also have a better self-dialogue process as well, which is really important. And I think that that's what's really at the core of the crisis today, is that a lot of people are getting confused and divided because there is like no ability to communicate, including with oneself. So when people are even trying to like figure out what is going on, and they're listening to this person's opinion and they're listening to that person, or maybe even reading a book, which is increasingly more rare that someone will take the time to do that, they don't have an ability to have a discussion with anybody, including themselves, as to how to process that information. And so they end up giving up, or they find, a kind of superficial structure that they can latch onto that's like very oversimplified typically. And they're just like, I'm just going to follow this in a very narrow way, and it's not their thoughts, it's but they take, for whatever reason, comfort and safety in oversimplifying. This is why we live in the world we live in, which oftentimes those simplified structures, they're accusing certain problems that are clearly not the only problem, or maybe not even the problem. And then it causes everyone to be looking in the wrong place for like what is really at the core of like how we got to such a bad situation in such a general way. So yeah, you guys are such a wonderful example, and I hope that we can help facilitate to get you guys better known. You should do like interview circuits, like with as many people as possible, because
I feel like
this is such an important lesson for everybody to hear.
Yeah. No, yeah, this is absolutely. And I feel like this is probably that's naturally going to be happening, I think, organically.
You're going to be on Jordan Peterson soon. I wouldn't be surprised.
That's a good momentary short-term goal to head towards. But I think the thing about Jordan Peterson,
that's all right. I'd sooner take a podcast with Ian McGilchrist.
Right. You brought Ian up to me a few times, and I ordered his book and I never opened it up. And you really, after our last chat, you really pushed me to do it. And I know before we end up going to Alberta to hang out with you guys, I will, Cynthia and I will look at Ian's work directly. So what is it about? What did you find? I have my own thoughts about Jordan. I think that there's something really great that he did by making transparent something that people thought you couldn't do, which is just become self-aware of critical lines of logic that could be applied to things that were supposed to be off limits, untouchable to the mind of reason, like how society is influenced around certain concepts of culture wars. What is the culture? How is it influenced? And all of a sudden he made his line of thinking known. So he wasn't just giving you finished ideas or opinions, but rather showing you how the opinion is formed, even if you disagree with elements of what he's saying. And there's a lot of what he says as detail that I disagree with, but I really do appreciate that he made that known so people could trace out how their mind can do the same thing and apply it to do work. Ian McGilchrist, could you say a little bit about him? Because I've heard so many people, Mike, honestly, so many people have been pushing me to read him. What makes him stand out? Why is he high value for you guys?
All right. Everyone's going to want to chime in on this one, so I won't go too long
Okay,
about that. Right. So actually what I'll do is I'll make a statement about Peterson, and then definitely go around the room about McGilchrist with his family, because they're going to rock your world. But I would agree that Jordan had an evolution that played. I believe in giving credit where credit is due, and I also really like to say thank you to people that genuinely stuck their hand out, whether knowingly or unknowingly. A ship doesn't concern itself with its wake. So the ripple effect that Peterson and his work had in his household, it can't be stated that it played a cornerstone beginning. Now, that being said, I definitely know how to say thank you to Jordan Peterson. I read Maps of Meaning 3 times. I did both of his other books. I feel like something happened along the way, and there's a meta pattern that's at play so far in my study, that just as certain institutions within empire really liked to lean at handing us Jung or Darwin, Huxley, Orwell, I feel like something has happened that has Jordan heading down a very similar trajectory, whether knowingly or unknowingly. I'm not going to try to presume an individual's heart, but there's some patterns on a meta scale that have me watching very closely, because it should be watched very closely. So I'll just leave it at that. But now, definitely go around the room, because Gilchrist, I could dominate the conversation on that topic, because I'm doing his book again in anticipation of you and Cynthia doing the book. And he has 2 other tomes that are following that master and his emissary. So, but yeah, I'll let you take it away, Noel.
Very cool.
So we have a saying in our household, know who you are so you can better negotiate. No, know what you are so you can better negotiate who you are, or who you want to be, or who you want to or choose to be. So that kind of started off with a bit of Gad Sad's work. In The Consuming Instinct? Yeah, kind of teaching you about just things that you do and why you do them, and very interesting work. And Jordan Peterson for us was his 12 rules for life. Like, they're great rules, like clean your room, incremental progress. Like, so cornerstone, 100%. And then along comes Ian McGilchrist, and I saw the title of the book and heard a little bit about it, and I just knew, I'm going to order this for Mike. I know he's going to read it, but I know it's going to change everything. And I was like, I'll order it anyway. So I ordered it, and then it changed everything. And Macy and Maddie, they have way better context on explaining it than I do.
Right on. Yep, Macy and Maddie, I think you've just been nominated to.
Do you? I got it. Okay. Gosh, no, Mom's not wrong. It definitely changed everything. So that book, it basically gives you a bit of a scientific understanding of your hemispheres of your brain, and it actually challenges some of the major orthodoxies that most people go towards, which is I don't know, the left hemisphere is for logic and mathematics and science and all that. That's actually not entirely true. And then same thing with the right. It's the artistic and it's the creative and all this. And it's like some of these tropes were entirely wrong. It's just there's more. Welcome to complex systems, right? It's more complicated than this dichotomy. And so this book is, whoa, it's a lot. So it starts with some scientific knowledge as to how the hemispheres function. But then later on, it goes on to how they map out onto the broader societal level. So even when we're watching or listening to Matthew and Cynthia, your guys' works, we will look at the hemispheres and we will go like, oh, like that's totally an example of the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And for us to categorize it as such is a little dichotomous, but we're mapping, right? But everything like that has to do with anything that has to do with human beings. It comes down to the hemispheres for sure. Like this book changed so much for our clan, and even the way that we negotiate with ourselves, because going down that path is crazy, because then you can take a look at it, and as you're reading it, you'll see what it is that you gravitate towards. And it's a fluctuation because everybody has two hemispheres, right? But it's depending on what mode of attention, because even in the book he explains that the left and the right hemisphere have two different modes of attending to things. They have two different ways of looking at the world. So it's almost like my mom's favorite character from Lord of the Rings is like Gollum and Smeagol, and it's 2 in 1, but that's us actually, and that's why that's so cool. And so on an individual basis, you can go like, am I a bit more left leaning in this moment? Whereas am I being a bit more right leaning in this moment? And the reason why it's called master and his emissary is because the right hemisphere is actually the master and the left hemisphere is supposed to be the emissary. But too often, and what you'll find in the book as you read it, so I don't want to, I'll pull a Matthew trying to do a Platonic. I'm not going to give you all the answers, but what I like about it is that the left hemisphere is not supposed to be super controlling of everything. It's actually supposed to be your intuitive knowledge of, almost like in your Science Unshackled book that we're all of our families reading. It's that leap and it's that the intuition, that discovery, and that's the right hemisphere. Right. And then the left hemisphere tries to control it because it thinks it is a master. And one of my favorite things in the book, just so that way I'm not going on for too long, is the fact that the right hemisphere is the only hemisphere that can teach us something that we don't already know. I think that's spectacular and fantastic. And the left hemisphere deals with positivity bias and what it knows, and it's controlling. So when people say, oh, this evil in the world, how could it have happened? It's like, it's because you have two hemispheres in your skull and you have to negotiate how it is that you want to play them out, in which mode of attention that you're going to attend to things, because a mode of attention is a moral act, right? Because how you choose to attend to the world influences how you see it and how you engage with it, and then that ripple effect just spans throughout, right? So yeah, I've gone a bit more on a tangent than I wanted to.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. No, I'm so, if I wasn't already sold, I'm completely off the cliff pushed. I'm definitely going to be reading this thing. And I mean, I think the question of intention is really key. And that's actually what, on a sidetrack or kind of connected, is what I really appreciated about Jordan Peterson's I did his self-authoring suite back in 2019. Did you guys do his self-authoring suite at all? Okay, for me, that I was in kind of a rough spot, and it helped me 2018, I guess, really start beginning to focus on, well, what do I want? And you're like, he's basically giving you a series of exercises to think about what's your goal, what's your intention, in terms of what made the person you were, what's crafting the person you are, what's crafting the person you want to be, and just set out a series of nested goals to just focus on learning how to like exercise that muscle. And when you start, you're like, wow, this is human. This is being human. How could you do anything but? And you only appreciate sort of after you focus on the act of intention, how little most people do that. And I know I lived most of my life sort of bouncing from like, or not most, but a big, too much of my life bouncing from momentary impulse and feeling without really being self-aware. Well, what do I want? What is my goal? What are my boundaries? What is my, it's, so I'm getting tastes of this in just hearing how you're introducing elements of this, but very, very interesting. Madison, did you want to also chime in with a thought or two on this, on
Sure, of course. I mean, well said though. That was really good. I'm glad Mom brought up the quote that we use quite frequently in our household: know what you are to better negotiate who you are, because who you are is a negotiation, and that happens throughout your entire lifetime. It's supposed to happen until the day you die. But what you are is like the biology, the hemisphere proclivity, things that we don't get a say on. This is my makeup, deal with it. And that's one thing that Jordan Peterson definitely helped at the beginning, was to know, for a woman, that I'm agreeable, I'm high in neuroticism. All of those things really help me manage my everyday demonstration. And then the hemispheres just took it that extra level. And it's so neat because I'm only 50 pages in. I'm really behind compared to the rest of the family into Science Unshackled. But it's so exciting, and I'm super pumped for you just to read it, because every time we listen to some of your work, both of you, Cynthia and Matthew, you already know the hemispheres. Like, you know it, and you talk about the pattern on a regular basis. You just don't use the words hemispheres because you haven't read the book, but you already see the pattern. So I'm super pumped because it'll just give you more that you already have, which is, and even the way you were describing in your intro, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a really good intro. It's a really good, even talking about your experience in school and how they tried to label you as the creative, emotional right hem. It's like your right brain. It's like, those are tropes, and you'll appreciate the book because they,
spell with it.
Yeah, they discard it. So I'm excited. I'm excited, and I don't want to. There's so much we could say, but
yeah. No, wisdom is sometimes the act of withholding and not saying as well as saying sometimes. So it's good. No, I appreciate that. It definitely increases the hunger. Sebastian, did you have a?
Oh, sure. I mean, Madison briefly summarized the 2 points that I was going to use. So I think I'll just go with my third one, which was the nice thing about his work is, at least in my opinion, he's a Keplerian, as you would say in your Unshackled book, because I'm on chapter 6. I'm only 120 pages in. But anyway, he's a Keplerian mind, but he's still alive and still doing great work today. So it's amazing to experience that, similar to yourself. I think the reason, even just the desire for Mike to bring it up and sort of throw it your way, is just because it's, I don't know, it's like connecting the two dots between two Keplerian minds that are of the modern era. Like, at least that's how I would try to summarize my point, is just both of your guys' works can really help connect a lot of dots for people and bring to bear a broader understanding of not only the broader horizon, but also the one right in front of them. So
sweet. Yeah. For anybody who might be listening to this on YouTube and a little bit confused about the language of Keplerian, just I'll say one little word on that. Or actually, Kyle, would you like to? Do you think you're in a position to help clarify what Sebastian might mean when he says Keplerian for anybody listening?
I could give it a brief fair shake, at least.
I mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it's all right. Our household would describe it as a very right hemispheric thinker. Takes in the broader context before he jumps to any finite conclusion. Doesn't try to reduce things. Is always willing to broaden his horizons and look outward to find the answers that he's looking for and make that creative leap. You know, Macy said that the right hemisphere is how you come to know things that you don't already know. And I think Kepler did a very good job at exercising his powers of doing said thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is totally correct. And there's no right answer to this question, right? It's pretty, but that is essentially it. Exactly. And I think the idea also of just thinking about like having faith that there is something to discover in anything that you put your mind onto. A lot of people lack the faith that behind the unknown, the wall of the unknown, there's nothing to be known. So they don't search. Even if they have knowledge, they've worked on their left brain, their logic side. They have the tools that if they tried to, they would make progress, but they lack the faith, so they don't really try, or they think that, oh, it's already all known. So they lack that impulse. Whereas like a Keplerian would launch into that unknown space with that confidence, and because of that, discover something that nobody else would discover. He could see something that would be right in front of everybody's face, but Kepler has that sense that, okay, I believed in harmony, and thus I found the harmony that organizes the orbital paths of planets, or in the case of the brain, the neural pathways of the brain, right, which have a certain sort of orbits that and relationships that have something causal. So it sounds really, I love that idea. A Keplerian psychiatrist. Is he a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a neurologist or how would you describe McGilchrist?
A little bit of all. He's got his expertise in broadly to generalize it in the brain, the human brain, and how it maps onto the world. So
there's
that's a good way.
Isn't he a what is he, Mike?
Neuroscientist.
Yeah.
Neuropsychologist.
That's what it is. Sorry.
He's pioneering. I would consider him pioneering ground. He's I think that's one of the facets about Gilchrist's work that I found so, like, it was similar like when I came across your work, I think that without knowing what I learned through Gilchrist's work, I wouldn't have been able to rapidly map that even Gilchrist was solving the same problem that you were trying to solve. He just doesn't understand oligarchical systems, but he knows the mind of the oligarchs. And the mind is the brain. And then another thing that allowed for myself with his work for me was, I am an oligarch. I have that full potential to be so. I've said it once before to you, but I've said it in the household many a times. Scorpion's going to scorpion, frog's going to frog. There are individuals that they would just rather lean towards their proclivity of thought without challenging the ping. One of the metaphors that gets used in the book is the surgeon and the scrub nurse, whereas the right hemisphere is the surgeon, the left hemisphere is the scrub nurse. The surgeon doesn't need the scrub nurse to perform the operation of life, but it knows that the odds of the success of that surgery is increased exponentially by working with the scrub nurse. And the left hemisphere has a tendency to think it's the surgeon, but it's not, because it always works as a representation of the surgeon. It works with Cynthia had actually alluded to this earlier when she was describing individuals that are stuck. They're stuck in small amounts of information to come to grandiose conclusions. I paraphrase, that wasn't obviously what Cynthia said, but that's how I interpreted the gist of kind of like when you run into that. There's a reason why we use the term small-mindedness. That literal statement comes from the left hemisphere, reducing an individual's lived demonstration that the right hemisphere maps this pattern, goes to the left hemisphere for data about the pattern that it's witnessed, and then it's supposed to give it back. But a lot of the times the left hemisphere, because it thinks it's the surgeon, doesn't want to give the information back. So we stopped pinging. And this plays into the conversation side of things that Cynthia also mentioned, is that to speak is to think out loud. And to think out loud is a negotiation, because I'm going to use words based on the rotation of, my hemispheres. And then there's all these ears and personalities that are going to receive this information. And we could get stuck on wording. We could get stuck on demonstration, tone, intonation, variances in my smile. Some people have a tendency to look at eyes more than they'll look at mouths, depending on which proclivity of hemisphere that they operate in. So what I think you guys will absolutely adore is, because you both have such talent for the individuals and the people, and you're looking at the statement that you guys have both used inadvertently in your own ways, is what are they doing? What are the people up to? And when you're describing it, for us having the foundation of Gilchrist's work, we know exactly which hemisphere is driving the ship of that person's mode of attention to the world. And it's painfully obvious what the outcome is going to be if left without some pain, cataclysmic, life-altering, striking event. We joke around sometimes and say everybody should get punched in the face because cognitive recalibration gives you a whole new outlook on life.
Yeah. Yeah, much healthier than the MK Ultra approach to depatterning through electroshock and drugs. It's
Yes.
good life or death experience. Always a good opportunity you don't want to miss. Cynthia, I was wondering, Cynthia, do you think that that there's or do you hear like a little bit of the Wolfgang Köhler idea in what's being described right now?
I haven't really looked in detail to Curler, but I feel like I'm learning so much, and that you guys should just give workshops too on like how you guys have become like expert communicators, and everyone's just really thoughtful and insightful. I'm just blown away. I feel like I'm kind of a student right now, just getting a bit of a class myself. So no, yeah, unfortunately, Matt, I never really read Kursler, so I won't be able to help you out with that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of, because Köhler, well, we talked about him a lot, but Köhler is sort of the neuroscientist, right? Who is a friend of
Gestalt psychology.
Yeah, the founder of the Gestalt psychology school.
Mm-hmm.
Does McGilchrist talk about Gestalt psychology at all? He does? Yeah, I guess he would.
Yeah,
of course
so
he does.
I'm assuming that are you familiar with GAD-SAD?
No.
Okay, so he's also out of Montreal. I believe he is a professor at McGill. Yes, he's a professor at McGill University, if I'm not mistaken. But he has a term called nomeological evidence. So whenever he's arguing, or whenever he finds himself in a debate with an individual that finds themselves overwhelmed with diversity, inclusivity, and equity lines of thinking, he has a tendency to use the term nomeological evidence, and he tries to tsunami individuals with basically everything that he can get his hands on, whether it's anthropological, historical, metaphysical, whatever it is that he
psychological.
Feels. Yeah, because he's cognitive behavioral therapies, social psychology, you name it. And all this to say is that Gilchrist's work of Mastering His Emissary is that's why I felt at this stage of my studies on these topics, it's irrefutable. It's irrefutable evidence. And he puts out a humble challenge even within I think it's in the preface, might be in the introduction. So forgive me, Mr. Gilchrist, if you ever listen to this. But anyways, he sets sort of a very humble, he's well aware that there's going to be detractors, but he knows that very few detractors are going to take the time to actually not only go through all of the information that he presents, even in areas of fields where he honestly says, forgive me for trespassing because I'm not an expert, but he pulls data sets from all sorts of other fields. So he lays out in the first half of his book the entire program, including the Gestalt. It's right. I know I just gave you a long-winded answer, but
no, that's good.
Yeah,
I like context. You know me, I context is good.
To add to that, though, in the book, the book's maybe about like this thick, and probably about this thick of it is like all of his references. Like he literally has, I would consider maybe 3 chapters worth of just all his receipts. And I'm like, so.
Cool. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, because I mean, I think that's the thing that's lost in a lot of the schools of popular psychology these days, in the Freudians and the Jungians, the introspectionists, and all these things. And then you got the behaviorist on the other side of the aisle. They all seem different on the surface, but when you get down to it, they share a lot of some common problems. And there's a lot of tapping into your subconscious, your dreams, your feelings, and all it's fine and good, and looking for symbolic meaning behind like why you dreamed of an extra branch on a tree or something. And okay, there's like maybe a purpose that you can get somewhere with it if you got somebody who's doing a good platonic dialogue with you as a Freudian psychoanalyst or something. But there's a lack of concern about, well, like, what is this mind anyway that we all are trying to heal? Like, does the mind exist for a purpose? If so, like, what is it? It seems like it has some connection to the brain. What's the purpose of the brain in a well-functioning state? Because everyone's looking at neurotic disorders and trying to, like, manipulate neurotic disorders, but they don't have like a guideline of, well, what is a healthy, well-integrated person actually like? What does a healthy instrument of the brain actually look like as their baseline to guide, well, what kind of advice am I giving to a patient? It's just not
that's
really
the basic problem of all of the typical therapy nowadays, is that they want you to just adapt to a sick society, rather than say, well, how can you be, as you guys were even saying, right, you're reflecting on how you've possibly contributed to a general problem within society, which I find is so incredibly sensitive. I was really blown away by that statement. And that's really sometimes when we're feeling depressed, or we're feeling, not so great about ourselves, and we're having problems with coping, or just functioning, in school or in our work, it's a healthy reaction. And again, Mike, what you were saying in terms of the decision you made to detach yourself from what seemed to be a situation that was not going to be as positive of an influence for yourself and your family. That's I think the biggest thing that's lacking in therapy, is that they try to just it's sort of like a surgical approach with chemicals, with people. And then other times it's just, you're just talking every week, and it will never end for, like, for your entire life. But it's the therapist just, kind of being this wall that you're bouncing things off of, that, it's kind of like it will never end. It's sort of a form of torture in a way, because it's like you're just repeating the process over and over again, and not figuring out how to get out of that loop that you're in. So that's one of the biggest criticisms actually we have of Jordan Peterson, is that there isn't enough of a critique of the problems of society, and there's too much, I think, of an idea of like how to ultimately fit into how society already is, which is that's kind of suicide. And I think it's really a healthy response we have amongst the youth, especially now. Like, obviously the youth are being hit like so hard in so many different directions, and I really feel for their generation. But there are a lot of youthful people like yourselves as well. I mean, you guys are definitely like probably at the top for like intelligent young people that we've talked to. But there's a lot of like a lot more self-awareness in this generation than I've noticed in like the older generations, typically in terms of a more general sense. And I think that it's a really healthy reaction that, you guys are not accepting that, things have to continue in this sort of a direction. And I think that there's a lot of hope with that. Anyway, yeah, I felt like I kind of ran. I'm so blown away by this conversation, by the way. This is so inspiring, just talking to you guys.
No, it is so reciprocated, right, Sebastian? We're not worthy.
No.
You reminded me of something G. Edward Griffin said. Someone was asking, what can the average person do? Stop being average. Even me, I associate you guys with my Promethean fire, because it took me a bit when we started doing the audiobooks and the podcasts. It wasn't my go-to. I love music, like just it's one of my salvations. So we'd be sitting in the car, and normally I would listen to tunes, but I was trying to listen to an audiobook, but I didn't have that same drive yet. So it's like, okay, it's a 30-minute drive. It's 30 minutes of an audiobook. I can do it. And it took a while. I didn't have that drive initially, but I knew it would come, and I just had to stay persistent. And now it is that's I have the Promethean fire. It is absolutely lit. I still love my music, obviously, but it has its time. And now so do the audiobooks and the podcast. But I like that you said that, Cynthia, because that Promethean fire and that I need to stop being average. It's not like it came naturally. I had to work on it. I had to look at society, look at myself, go, I can be better. You know, even if this is the reality of what people say is, you're supposed to pursue it as if you could be better. You're supposed to pursue life as if God exists. So it's like, okay, get off my butt. Let's go.
To add to that, though, that just made me think, because we're going to probably bring up your Science Unshackled book later on. But when you were describing the word infinity, or at least quoting Poe, I think it might have been quoting Kepler, but
Poe loved it, the word. Yeah, he used the word infinity a lot.
Infinity, yeah. It's what Cynthia just made me think of in terms of like, because a lot of the times you can ask why it is that we're doing what we're doing in the first place. Like, is it just progress for the sake of progress? And I don't think that's it at all. I think that when I read that segment on infinity, it was so clear. It's striving for that oneness of human beings, for that, just the thought upon the thought, you know. It's a process, it's an action, it's something that we're trying to reach that we don't know if we'll ever fully reach. And we don't know if we'll fully reach. But what it made me think of, though, in terms of what Cynthia says, because when I think of what's going on today with like the postmodern movement and all that, it's like, no, I'm not going to accept the fact that there's like multiple genders and all that. And it's like, and I actually have my reasons as for doing it, not just because it's the fact that it's common sense, but also it's because of the fact that I believe in fundamental truths, because I know they exist, right? Because that word infinity, like that resonated so much in terms of we can reach fundamental truths, like as human beings, where we it's almost like a resonance of like a code of conduct that we all know in our hearts is like pure, like, you know what I mean? So that, I feel like, is what we're trying to strive towards, to figure out what is that and how do I embody that for my fellow human beings? How do I be that for all of you? But yeah, that's where my brain went.
Beautifully said. Really beautifully said. Yeah, no, I'm very very enlivened to just hear you guys communicate, and you all have this natural, organic mode of just having a composition, little mini compositions that are just so thoughtful. It's nice. On the issue of some of these self-destructive cycles that our society gets caught into, and that, have you guys ever seen, just, this might seem like a side note, but it isn't really, have you guys watched What About Bob?
Yes, of course. Baby steps. Baby steps.
Baby steps.
I saw it in the theater. I'm old, okay?
But I loved it. That was such a great intervention, because I mean, at the end of the day, what allowed him to finally get out of, or break free of, this addiction to psychotherapy? Which is, if anybody's watching this on YouTube and you haven't seen What About Bob, go watch What About Bob. It's such a brilliant film. What allowed him to finally like break out of this addiction and tap into his solution, or the pathway towards his solution? Do you guys remember? Baby steps. Well, that was part of what the book was by Richard Dreyfuss, the Freudian guy with all of the baggage he didn't resolve himself, ironically, as is the case with too many Freudians, unfortunately. But it was the Richard Dreyfuss's son who I don't remember that part. Oh, they had like a bonding experience, and the son described they had a conversation, him and Bob, about the fear of death and how everyone is afraid to like just think about our mortality, and just like really lean into that big existential question. Everyone's running away from it. So there's like this underlying sort of, I guess there's many, but this is like a big underlying sort of fear that holds a lot of people in place, is not thinking, well, because when you think about mortality, which we all can be self-aware of, the next question is, well, what's the purpose of this? And once you have that question, now you can go somewhere. You got something solid you can build on and navigate, like, you know, through the stormy waters with. Well, what's the purpose of my life? And obviously we're not going to know everything, but we have an idea of the infinite. We have an idea of these universals that we can tap into, that seem to be common amongst different cultures, amongst different people, that we could put ourselves in other people's shoes looking back at us. We could put ourselves into different shoes within ourselves, right? The golem phenomenon. I guess golem's not a great example, but the we could be self-aware and have dialogues with ourselves, and really get somewhere. And a lot of people just don't have that. So how that movie was able to be made in Hollywood in the modern age, I guess it couldn't be made today. It had to be made in the 80s, but it's just beautiful, beautiful the way they were able to intervene on that.
A good quote that would help play into that was Mark Twain's the two most important days, the day you were born and the day you realize why.
Yeah, I need to read more Mark Twain.
I think it's also like in schools, I think that if you're not taught critical thinking, and especially being raised in the church my whole life, if you start to think critically, you're told that it's new age and you really shouldn't think critically and you shouldn't read books because unless it's the one book, you don't need to read anything else. You know what I mean? So like, even as boomers, you'll hear, well, that's the way that I am. And can't you accept me for the way that I am? And it's like, well, no, you've just boxed yourself in and you've just labeled yourself and you've just taken all your potential and thrown it away because you don't want to move from that spot. So I think, I mean, I have boomer parents and so I can kind of attest to that. So, and speaking of mortality, like just watching my dad pass away like a year ago, going through the cancer with him, I watched him like entertain mortality, and then he started to change as a human being over facing it, because he was like, he accepted it, he was comfortable with it, and he used the last couple of years to really change and grow after he had accepted it. It was really, it was a beautiful experience. It was really neat to see, but overall, I don't think that people are even aware. Like Madison said, if you're not aware that you're neurotic, or you're hangry when you don't eat, like Peterson says, or that you have cognitive behavioral traits that you can fix once you're aware of them, and you can be better, and that there's all these steps and processes. And like, even with the hemispheres, it's like that pinging is almost sometimes like that gut feeling you don't listen to, but you really should. It's like, when you start to learn these things and you start to walk them out and you start to enact them, I would say that's faith in action.
Yeah.
So, you know?
Yeah, I agree. No, that's it. And at the end of the day, we are our life is sort of the laboratory, right? Like, we have to test these ideas out, see what works, what doesn't work, try new ideas out. I know when I went through a sort of period of Christian fundamentalism in my youth as well, there was this tendency to label any attempt to overanalyze anything or think about critically, even, well, God forbid you should apply critical thinking to the Bible itself, but anything, there was a sense that, oh, that's pride. Pride is a sin. Don't just turn off the mind and have faith. And it's like, well, didn't God also give us this mind as an instrument that he wants us to use? I mean, why wouldn't it be kind of a sick joke if we were just given this mind and we're not supposed to, and it was a sin to use it? You know, so that's something that I think a lot of people, it's liberating for a lot of people who realize, there's maybe using it badly, that should be considered maybe a sin. Using the gift that God gave you poorly, okay, that could be damaging to yourself and others, but why not use it well? Then there's a way out of that.
Yeah.
When it comes to I know there's so many directions to go, but I know time has wound down. But there was something that you guys have introduced me to that I find very inspiring. Cynthia finds very inspiring. Over to the youth. It's a very interesting organization. I've been just playing around a little bit, watching some of the videos on the Rumble channel. Can you guys tell me a little something about this international? Not even, I thought it was maybe a grouping of Calgary young people or Alberta-based young people, but no, this seems to be much bigger than that. I'm fascinated. Could you guys say, I know Macy and Madison are perhaps a little bit more involved, but I'm guessing Kyle and Sebastian, are you guys also participating in the Over to the Youth process?
Yeah, we contribute more behind the scenes stuff. We have personal chat stuff where we share information and coordinate stuff. But yeah, as for the face of everything and the interviews and whatnot that they put on, that's going to be Maddie, Macy, and a few of the other members, but they're the ones who'll give you the most valuable information as for the organization's modus operandi.
Yeah, I'm very excited by this organization. Can you guys say a little something? What is this?
Oh my gosh. We're still figuring that out in my honest opinion.
Yeah.
It started international, yes. Thanks to Rain Trozy. It was Dad. Dad had sent me the World Council for Health. Do you know them?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they had posted an animation competition and Dad had followed them on Telegram. So Dad sent me that little poster, and so I entered. I'd never done an animation competition before, but why not? And I won, fortunately, and that's what connected me to Rain Trozy. And then me, him, and a couple others were kind of just started off the ground. He's the original founder, but he does give a lot of credit to me and Tom and some of the other friends. But it did start international, but it's funny because thanks to that, I met a bunch of local Calgary youth. So that's the weird thing. It's like you'd figure, because me and the family, we've been getting involved, but I hadn't met. There's a lot of older folk fighting for freedom, but there's not a lot of younger folk, because younger folk, like Cynthia alluded to, they're in a rough place. So they're in their own scope. They're a bit self-centered, self-absorbed, not really looking at the world around them. So we were some of the youngest faces there. And then add on the fact that we're there as a family. We were we were the weird anomaly. But through Over to the Youth, that became my talking point. It's like then a parent would come and talk to me and say, yeah, in my youth group, we were doing blah. And they say, you have a youth group? Yes, I have a youth group. And that's kind of how it started. And then I got introduced to a bunch more Calgary people. And it just, I'm always a little bit proud to say there are a lot of Alberta people in Over to you. But it's mainly I like to say it's like a sanctuary for youth that are trying to think. We don't all have the same opinions, not in the least bit, but we're all trying to encourage thinking and getting involved wherever you are locally, because I definitely believe local is always the way to go. I can't win against governments or oligarchies, but I can win against baby oligarchies that are in my neighborhood, So we try to encourage that of everybody when they get overwhelmed.
Yeah. You don't want to set yourself up for disappointment or lift weights you can't lift. I mean, you got to know, in a sense, your limitations when you go to the gym, but you also want to push the boundaries to get into that discomfort zone a little bit, not to the point where you break your back, but when you're going to be 40, 50 years old at some point, and at that point, will you have developed those psychospiritual muscles so that you can carry out those heavier fights, perhaps on a higher level, on a federal or international basis? Who knows what kind of opportunities the world will provide as you grow. So if you don't waste your time and you're learning the ropes with what things that you can immediately interface with in your council and your city council and student groups, whatever, then these are all going to feed back into your life experience that will give you resources that you would normally be deprived by if you didn't take those little leaps. So great.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better. Like even this conversation, you bringing up Over to the Youth, when I had started it, I thought, we were 5 of us showed up on a weekly basis because we have weekly Sunday meetings just to talk as a community over Zoom. And there were only 5 of us. I thought nothing of it. And then we did our first podcast. And me and Macy got invited to speak at a We Unify Reclaiming Canada conference because they had never seen youth talk like that before. So that just completely blew my mind. And even right now, we have Rain Trozy representing Over to the Youth at the International COVID Summit that's happening in Romania. So it's like, I could not have imagined. That is not at all the intent, even you being inspired. I mean, we were talking about faith earlier. Our family dynamic is definitely, we don't see it around. So I guess it is its own little anomaly, but it is faith that I keep doing what I do personally. It's not like a Sherpa doesn't concern itself with the wake. I don't know what I'm Over to the Youth is doing for other people. And I don't know I'm going to meet you guys one day, but then you say you're inspired. And it's funny because it's your work. and looking at all the history that you and Cynthia have brought up, that made me realize that the faith that I've been acting upon in over to the youth, just the incremental progress, keep going, demonstrating the right values, it's real. It's a tangible, real result you can get. Exactly. And I thought I was just faith initially, but then listening to you guys, and you guys demonstrate people like Poe and Kepler, and they talk and write about this years and years ago. I'm like, okay, it's real. So all I got to do is keep on keeping on. Anyway, sorry, I got a topic from Audie.
Well, no, because it connects, because Audie, our motto is lead by example, be the change you wish to see in the world, right, Gandhi? And it's like, well, that's what we're all trying to do right now. It's just we do it with our young kids that just feel like they have an idea of that and they want to actually put it into practice. And so we all, rising tides float all ships. So by me and Maddie, you know, demonstrating ourselves in the best way we can, they do the same, and then vice versa. Because we've had it where they've come over to Calgary, actually, like some of the members, one lived in Costa Rica, the other in the UK, and we literally just had them down here to visit us. And all of us together in a room, it's literally like a bunch of young, stupid, but also intelligent young adults trying to figure out how to be the best versions of themselves. And it was amazing. It's almost like I like having winner friends. It's friends that encourage me to be the best version of myself. So sometimes I'll feel shame because I'll be like, oh my gosh, like they are doing so well. And then I'm like, okay, I gotta get good. And I that's what Audie is supposed to be. Surround yourself with those people that challenge you.
Right. Yeah. Like why? Yeah. Normalize excellence. Why is that such a foreign idea? It's right. We're like calibrated to expect mediocrity and stupidity as what's normal, but it's like, why don't we expect excellence, something that's better than what is? That should be what we expect out of ourselves and our friends as well. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we have because we use Telegram as our main mode of communication, and we have a get good room, which is precisely for that, you know, pursue excellence and pursue knowledge. And Kyle is the main contributor because he can listen to, I guess he can say, because I just see it. You get good room. There's more every single day for me to read. I'm always behind because of the amount of information he consumes.
I love
I
how
don't want to say 90% of those links that he puts in that room are Matt and Cynthia's work, but I do want to say that 90% of those
90%
links
of it is you guys.
is you guys. We listen to every day. He'll be like, so if you didn't know about X topic, so-and-so and so-and-so summarize a really good sort of basic understanding if you're trying to get into an understanding about this topic. And then he'll just put the link of one of the podcasts that you guys are on.
Oh, cool.
I literally was staying
daily.
up. Sorry. Oh, I stayed up till 3 a.m. listening to a podcast you were doing, Cynthia, with Coffee with Mike, right? Because I couldn't sleep, so I was like, I'm gonna listen to some Cynthia.
Dude, I was on a construction site, like pulling staples out of plywood on a deck with like some ear protection on, and underneath I had my Bluetooth earbuds in, and I was listening to that first part that Jay helped edit for you and Cynthia, that Cynthia was narrating about the occults, the UFO cults and stuff like that. I had to listen to that 3 times just so I could get my small brain around it. But I found a place for it. I was like, construction site, my foreman's left me to a task for the next 2 hours. This is perfect. I'm gonna listen to Cynthia.
As long as you weren't operating heavy machinery, because
no,
your mind could be heavily blown.
Well, I watched it once, but then I listened to it. Don't worry,
cool.
we were safe.
All right. I wouldn't sleep well knowing that I caused you to lose a finger. Oh, that's cool, guys. That's really good. So for people watching who might find themselves within, I suppose you guys probably interface with a lot of younger people in their teens, 20s, who would like a little bit of substance in their lives and are excited about over to the youth and what you guys are doing with this. How do they start? What advice would you give to people watching who want to get to know you guys or help out, or maybe start a chapter in their part of the world, or what do they do?
Start a chapter.
Literally.
Start.
Read the book.
You know, It's definitely funny being in a youth organization because that's the question I get regularly. How do we get more youth involved? And um, I can't control other people. I only control myself. So I always say, you know, watch. You can reach out, and half the people that are in OTTY didn't even come for the knowledge or anything. They came for the friends and the friendships. So I mean, I can say over to theyouth.com.
Good. Okay.
There you go.
All right. That's
there's
simple.
a rabbit hole.
That's simple. Cool. And do you guys do occasionally, like when you have your Zoom meetings, do you have speakers who come in to do a little presentation and dialogue or anything like that? Or
is that an offer? Would you like to come, please?
Did I just walk into that?
Yeah. Yes.
You can infer.
Matt is already sold. He's like playing a little bit hard to get. But...
Yeah. Wait, before we started this, I was telling Cynthia, do you think they'll ask me to speak? Do you think they'll ask me to speak on one of their groups?
Cynthia, can we have you too?
We'll adopt
of course.
Sebastian just said that they'll adopt us.
Yes, please. Yeah, just come on down.
Okay.
We'll make room.
Okay.
Yep. No, me and Matt. Now I call you Uncle Matthew. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Oh, we went there. Okay.
I could make it more awkward. I really could.
Hey, if we can jam all those young people in here for like, we joke around thinking that because all the young people had such a good time coming down here because we challenged the ever loving shit out of each other and always under the sun.
Demonetized.
Everything. I think I've heard.
Oh, you can say shit. It's fine.
A couple things.
YouTube is very tolerant to vulgarity. It's fine.
For the people who have listened to hundreds of hours, I've listened to thousands. So I'm well aware of the verbal judo that Matt plays. All this to say, we can make room for you too, because the nice thing about Audie is the demographic that's there. We want to encourage. We also find ourselves involved with a lot of groups that are trying to make a difference in Alberta. And I think that Cynthia's work and your work would be absolutely fantastic if we could try to encourage an expansion of the map, the lay of the land that they find themselves in. There are some fantastic people that we have the honor and privilege of knowing and calling, the term freedom fighters, I guess, perhaps, if you want to put it like that. I mean, as you know, we were involved in the AGM and we find ourselves politically active. And I never thought I'd be on a constituency association and to have our family, show up as a group of 6 to go and vote and be a part of policy and governance meetings. And we just had a town hall recently that we watched our poor MLA struggle through with a few people that would be left of the political spectrum. But anyways, all that to say is that it would be great to add some context, because I find that myopic consideration that when you're dealing with an ethos of, I'm dancing a fine line here. It's a trope. So like I too, like my wife, spent a lot of time involved in religious organizations. And I appreciate the loyalty of this statement. God said it, I believe it, that settles it. I understand this. And there is something to be said for that type of loyalty. And I understand where that comes from, even hemispherically speaking. But that is too short-sighted. And once the context of realizing are we the baddies, Fritz, kind of rolls into the zeitgeist, I would like to see the Overton window shift a bit, so that people consider what it is that you and Cynthia are alluding to. Like when you set out to do your documentary series with Jay, you had said yourself, you were thinking like 1 or 2 episodes, and now it's like, now we got to tell 8. It's like, well, of course you got to tell 8. We're talking about a historical context of nothing but lies after lies. There's a strategy after strategy is being implemented. And we are surrounded by people that are very, very aware, but it's almost like they'll think to a certain distance, and then the very same wisdom that allow them to navigate the BS of certain narratives, then all of a sudden the sleight of hand from these master magicians comes in, and all of a sudden CSIS has got the right information, or China's
Right.
the big bad, or Vladimir Putin's about to have a heart attack, and BRICS is truly controlled opposition, and it's like, I listen to everyone, so let's not, don't get me wrong, I do. There is not a human being that I will not allow them to penetrate my mind, whether it's foolish or not. I'd rather make the gravest of mistakes than surrender my own judgment. So I need to hear from everyone, and then I will think deeply on these things. But once they've been thought of deeply, and I come to what I believe is my conclusion, then now it's time to barter. Now comes negotiation, and I will present my arguments, and I will present my lines of reasoning, and I will present a large scale line of thinking. And I would love that assistance from you and Cynthia in perhaps a workshop with some of these different groups, if I can start to sort of penetrate, if you will, and that's the wrong word. If I can present everything I do with these individuals is really out of love. Like, there's a men's group that I'm a part of, and it's like, there's a lot of love that I have for these men, and they have shown nothing but beautiful energy for my family. And so I feel that it would be an injustice if we could not in some way try to share something that has been so pivotal in our journey, our growth, and our relationship of, what you and Cynthia have kindly brought into our world. I would like to offer that gift to them. And sometimes there's individuals that they think I'm insane. I'll have like 30,000 hours of research in like 3 years and still going strong. And so they defer, which fair enough. I wish that they wouldn't, but there's some deferences. I would like to then go, if they don't want to read a book and they don't want to take the time to crush a podcast, perhaps when we offer them an in-person presentation and we can tailor something that would maybe help give them, we call it paying the right hemisphere, expose the paradox. Because once the right hemisphere starts that process, it's very difficult to silence it after that. That's where the Promethean fire comes from. It's the awakening of the right hemisphere. So yeah, there's people that could use all of our help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think from
Well,
my
and before you even say that, I am
yeah.
so sold, and
Yeah.
we want to work with you guys and do
Yeah.
everything we can to help facilitate this process. Like, again, I mean, I feel that I've learned so much just in this small amount of time. So, yeah, I think that this is such a fruitful collaboration that for the potential of what we can do. And just like you were saying, Madison, that you just start something and you just do it because you know that it's the right thing to do. It makes sense, and who knows where this is going to go, but obviously it's nothing but positive positive outcome in this. So yeah, I'm so sold. You guys are like, I will do whatever I can to help with that process, and of course Matt as well.
Of course.
You can have my room.
Wait a minute. I'm not going to be like adopted.
Oh no. Oh yes, you are.
No, there's several steps ahead, Ari. I just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed that when Cynthia and I decided a few years back to try this thing out and experiment with the Rising Tide Foundation, we didn't really know. We didn't have a grand scheme or a plan. We just knew we love ideas. There's a deficit of ideas out there. Let's create what we can try to do is create a space for us to express what we have inside, and try to create a space for other people to express what they have inside. And we'll see what resonates. We'll just see. And of course, just by putting yourself out there, all of a sudden you get resonance in all sorts of unexpected places. And people who sort of beat to that same frequency, you kind of, it's like a felt thought, right? People just sort of can tune a little bit, and you start just meeting people who have the fire lit on varying degrees. And it's great for the morale too, because if you were just like moving through the cycle day to day without trying to create something new, you'd get easily demoralized because you're encountering a lot of people who are not their best, let's just say, right? It can get a little demoralizing over time. So to be able to have, and that's one of the good things about the whole pandemic crap, is it did at least force us to start getting comfortable in using Zoom and interfacing all of a sudden with people we would never normally talk to, separated by wide distances, that could then build new associations, new dynamics of creative communication. So yeah, what you guys are building, what you represent, what you're building with these the over to the youth, and then your broader philosophy, your esprit, which I mean, participating in local government, local politics, being a part of clubs, groups, and just building friendships and relationships and creating opportunities for ideas to grow. That's great. That's all. What more can you ask for, right? So anytime, yeah, we should talk detail in the coming weeks ahead about some good moments to jump over to Alberta. I haven't been there in a long time, and yeah, get to know you guys a little bit more and see what we can create or help create. The creation's already begun, and what we can help with.
I think I laughed because COVID actually gave us the family that we found now that we wouldn't have found before. Like the people that we have met and touched base with, we wouldn't have ever met without COVID. So I'm actually thankful for that. And then when we had the youth group come and stay with us, we've had them come stay with us twice now. Everyone's talking about doing a retreat in the spring, and we're supposed to host it. And maybe we're going to take everybody crown camping, because before COVID, we didn't even go crown camping. And now it's like, okay, that's a thing. And then people are like, can we come and hold out workshops in the bush? And I'm like, yeah, we can figure out something. So
yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, we'll totally do Keplerian. Yeah, we'll do the Keplerian monochord and sing astronomy, all that good stuff. Yeah, this will be fun. It'll be good. Yeah. Well, guys, this is what an enriching evening. This is a great way to end my day. Cynthia, what did I tell you? Aren't they great?
I had to fight back tears at certain points in this discussion since I was so moved. But yeah, I'm so happy. I can't even express it. But I really look forward to working with you guys further, and we'll definitely check out the book that you're referencing.
Can we?
Awesome.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Till our next one.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.